Well, welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay. I'm joined by Eric Stearns, and today we're digging into my sermon from Sunday, which was about peace and experiencing peace that is found in Christ and experiencing peace as God gives it through Christ, and not fleeting, not conditional, just peace when we need it. And so we're going to talk about what chaos looks like in our lives and how we find peace in the midst of all things. So let's get into it.
Sounds good.
So there's a lot that I cut. This was a really long sermon until it wasn't, because just prayer time went forever because there's just all the things going on. Mm-hmm. And on the day focused around peace, like that felt strangely appropriate.
It totally felt appropriate.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that sermon with this friend of mine ever since. I'm like, I had to lift that up during church.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's such a hard thing to go through. I mean.
So yeah, he's 41, 3 kids, diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
Great dude.
Sure.
One of the best people. Only person besides you and my wife that I sit down and have a regular conversation about the Bible. Mm-hmm. Today I called him. He was on his way back from a project, and so I called him just on a couple of things. And he goes, I thought about just calling you today just to discuss the Bible, but ended up not. I'm like, man, because he's only worked at DGR for 18 months, I think.
Okay.
But to have that close relationship that quickly is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a 95% success rate.
Okay.
So everything should go fine. But there is the 5% that you're just going to
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
be stressed about.
Yes.
Stuff like that shouldn't happen. But
Correct.
especially when it's to people like him. When we're talking about peace in chaotic times, I'm just like, or like listening to the sermon today on my way home. And it's just chaotic at work and at home with Jenna taking on preschool and everything else.
Yeah.
And just listening to the sermon just gave me a sense of peace. So thank you.
Yeah.
It's God that's doing it. It's not you. But
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging that, because that's absolutely right. Yeah. Yep. That's actually one of the things that I ended up even in the writing process cutting, because I really wanted to dive in, where to John 14, where Jesus says, "My peace I give you. I don't give it as the world gives, and so do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." The peace that is outside of the gospel of Jesus Christ is a peace that does not last. Mm-hmm. It is a peace that is fleeting. It is a peace that is conditional. It is a peace that it does not have the permanence that the peace that comes from Jesus Christ being a part of our lives and being a part of our world. He doesn't give peace like that. He gives a peace that is lasting, and that we can really sink our teeth into and have some hope around, and really, like I said, what I did include on Sunday was Paul's words that Jesus Christ gives us a peace that passes understanding, a peace that doesn't make sense. And I just think that is such a powerful thing when we are in the midst of chaos, that just to pause and to remember and to know that there is a sense of peace that profound, that is available to us, that is ours if we'll claim it.
Well, and I thought about too, like when things are chaotic in life, you go to those people who have always been supportive, who have always been there for you in whatever's going on. But if you think about it, and so that's what I equate, how I feel, or how I equate the peace that God gives us, is that person is still a person. He's still a fallen, part of a fallen world, right?
Yep.
So like you said, that's conditional. It's going to go away.
Yeah.
The only thing that's truly going to be steady and you're always going to be able to rely on is God. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of, I don't know, I like to compare things to what I know and what I can touch.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of putting that. Like there will be a point in time where unfortunately, this is just the way the world works. When you rely on that other person, that it's not God for peace, there's going to come a time when you guys are both going through something, and you're just going to have to look at each other and say, we're on our own this week, aren't we? And let that, and have to let that be okay, because that's not respectful to the other person going through stuff. Having that larger sense of peace is so important. Well, I had about 4 different sermon introductions before I settled on the quote from Adam Hamilton. I liked that book quite a bit, it not being a silent night, because we do have just these unrealistic expectations of the Christmas story. I mean, this is still the story of a person being born. That person is Jesus, the literal Son of God, but it's still a story of a person being born, and that is not a silent activity. That is that's chaos.
Especially on the first kid.
Yes, heavens, yes, that's chaos. Like putting myself in the position of Joseph when we had Auden, you don't know what's going on, and the doctors can say words to you, but your brain's not there. That's not happening. And you're gonna freak out over every little thing that happens. Is that normal? Is that how it's supposed to go? And the path to where we are in the gospel story when Jesus is born, it's not been an easy ride. Mary, by all accounts, should not be pregnant. Joseph, by all accounts, should not have stayed with her. Yikes, And then there's no room at the inn. There's the decree of this census, and everyone has to go to their ancestral homes. And so they have to travel quite a distance from Nazareth, which is on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee, all the way down to Jerusalem. It's not an easy story. It's not a peaceful story. It's chaos. And so I like Adam Hamilton naming, and just, that whole entire series is just so good. Watch this space. It might come back around to us. We'll see what happens. There are just chaotic moments in our lives, and there can be a sense of peace in the midst of those things.
Right.
There is a sense of peace in the gospel story. I can just imagine a moment after Jesus is born, everything has calmed down. I just imagine Mary and Joseph looking at each other and saying, we did this. We're going to do this.
Listen, I was just thinking about, and I know everyone's birth stories of their children are different and have different experiences. But yeah, so with Avenel, the first kid, it was the whole thing is chaotic. But think about that too. We get the comfort of technology and electricity and temperature control and doctors and nurses and
epidurals
and all of the things that Mary would have never had.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But then, so you go through all that chaos. The baby comes out, do the cord thing, whatever. I just remember the sense of peace after the baby was all cleaned up and handed to Jenna for the first time. And the baby could just lay with Jenna. There's nothing that can describe that.
Correct.
Sense of peace.
Correct.
And to say that God's not a part of that, is not a part of this discussion, but he's totally there in that moment.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter how many kids you have, that experience is unique with all of them, but just equally as and just as equally powerful as the first time.
Yes. As both of us sitting here, dads of 3. Yeah, I can affirm that. Yeah. It's just so interesting how they can be so different right from the start, because Auden was fine, but he wasn't, Simon was born and he was born hungry, and he nursed for 45 minutes. He was born hungry. And just, we couldn't get enough, and we had to just pull him off to get him up to, to get us out of the delivery room and up to our normal room, and he was not happy the entire time. So, and then Emmeline was just an entirely different thing. And the almost crazy thing about Simon being born is he was born at 6:16, and we both in the morning, and we both have alarms set for 6:15. And so I very nearly missed the birth of Simon because I was turning off our stupid cell phone alarms. But I turned around and I got him silenced, and I turned around and there he was. I was just like, oh, oh, hey, buddy,
Mhm.
so
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
That's
But you're
funny.
absolutely right. There is just such an overwhelming piece of that process being done and everyone being okay. And yeah.
You got to think that that's what it was like for Mary too.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Even in less than ideal circumstances. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, we talk about how it's weird that Jesus came as a baby.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about the peace and the peace that God provides, we talk about at birth how much peace, the peace that comes after the baby's born.
Right.
But how about like when, as a parent, when you're holding your sleeping baby for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything? Is there any better experience as a parent than holding your sleeping child?
Nope.
Except for at 3 a.m. when you just want them to go to sleep.
Correct. Correct. But yeah, I am absolutely not. Yeah. Yep. When Auden was born in 2016, and so it was during the Chicago Cubs' great run to the World Series, and like the night that he was born, we sat in our hospital room. We watched a baseball game together. I held him the entire time. I mean, unless I couldn't because he was eating, but I held him the entire time, and we just sat and watched baseball. And I just think that that's one of the best things in life.
Mm-hmm. Everett was born during around Thanksgiving time, and so that's when all of the Bahamas classics for college basketball happened. So
Yep.
he and I got to sit and watch college basketball.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Or hey, Oliver was born during COVID, so Jen and I got 2 days in the hospital by ourselves with the baby,
Yes.
which was awesome.
Yep. Emmeline was the same way. Yeah, It was just you and your support person, and that was it.
No.
Yeah. Simon was born the night of the tornado in Sioux Falls.
There's just some peace about having babies, even though it's extremely chaotic
Yes.
the whole time, and still is.
Mm-hmm. So maybe God's plan wasn't so crazy after all. That's what
Right?
we're saying.
I think so.
Yeah, I can buy that. I just think that there are so many layers to the story of just how the chaos could have just reigned supreme. I mean, Mary is so young, and so I can't imagine not being terrified. Even if the angel starts by saying, "Hey, God has found favor with you. This is going to be good news. You're going to have a baby." Those things don't necessarily match.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary is just accepts it with such grace and just such this, like I said Sunday, with just so much peace. I mean, how can that possibly be? I mean, I would freak out. And then Joseph comes and Mary tells him this story of, hey, God said it's God's doing, and it's not that I've, been unfaithful or messed around or anything like that. Would you have bought it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big question. Would you have understood, or would you have stood by Mary in those instances and been at peace with that decision? And it seems like for Mary and Joseph, they were at peace with that decision. And I just think that that's such a profound part of the story that we overlook, because it's just we take it on face value sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of just not thinking deep enough about it, but yet there is this real sense that this could have gone completely sideways.
Mm-hmm. But I do like how you said, is John just kind of paraphrasing the conversation, or was there a time where
Right.
Mary did freak out?
Right. The way that my preaching professor always said that in seminary was that Luke has the mom stories
Sure.
that only moms can tell.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have the story of it's 2:30 in the morning and Mary is being, kicked in the ribs by her child and just wants to lay down and sleep. And Elizabeth's in the exact same station because she's just as pregnant as Mary is. Was there a 2:30 in the morning conversation where, Mary and Elizabeth commiserated together of being pregnant, and just, what is this going to mean, and how is this going to work, and how are, I can just envision that being absolutely a part of the conversation.
They're still people.
Exactly. Yes. They are still people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No matter how great a person you are, you're still going to have those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because we believe that Jesus is the only one who is perfect.
Right.
So wouldn't that mean that Mary was imperfect?
Yep.
And would have
Yeah.
anger and fear
yeah.
all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not for the podcast, but that's one of the differences between us and the Roman Catholics, is they believe that, Mary was without sin. But, that's...
That would make sense.
Yes. Yep.
Learning something new every day.
Uh-huh.
Good job, Clay.
They also believe in the perpetual virginity of Mary, despite the fact that there are brothers of Jesus named in the gospel.
How's that work?
Exactly.
So they were all from God too?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. I don't know if it's all Roman Catholics that believe that, but I definitely know that the perpetual virginity of Mary is a belief of the Catholic Church.
Can't be true.
No, absolutely cannot. Like, proven by the Bible cannot be true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That seems odd.
Uh-huh. Yep. There are even some that take their Marian devotion so far as to say that she was born of a virgin as well. Like that Mary's mother was a virgin, and yeah. There are people that will go that far.
Now, aren't you just like projecting at that point?
Little bit. Yes. Yeah. That's why I'm not a Catholic. That's one of many reasons why I'm not a Catholic is Marian devotion. I don't see that from the scriptures. I don't understand where it comes from. Yeah. She was just a person.
Mm-hmm.
She was the God bearer, but she was still just a person.
And that doesn't have to be a bad thing.
No.
Like Paul was just a person.
Exactly. Yes.
Peter was just a person.
Yes. They were all just people. And God used them in mighty and wonderful ways. And, not just to drag us right back to the Peter series, but that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to find... Because, this whole thing has been about how Mary and Joseph found peace in the midst of these adverse conditions. And, we can draw and have access to this same peace. And so what does that look like for you in life?
So when things are chaotic, how do we get through those things?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think it's the promise that everything's going to work out fine.
Mm.
I think did I tell you this from my grandpa's funeral last week? Maybe. This was just the ultimate sense of peace. I'm going to lose it again. But anyway, right before my grandpa passed away, he was sitting with my mom's brother and discussing, well, my grandpa said to my uncle, Bruce, you don't know what to say. It was 2 days before grandpa died. Mm-hmm. He goes, you just don't know what to say in this situation, do you? And Bruce goes, no, I don't. And my grandpa said to Bruce, everything's going to be fine. Mm. And just that sense of no matter what we're going through, everything's going to be fine is what keeps you going.
Yeah.
I think I've been blessed with a very level head, and I don't get too high or too low or anything like that. That helps a lot too.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, it allows me to kind of help, if things are going crazy at the house or in the family or something, it kind of helps Jenna and the kids get through things because they're a little more emotional than I am.
Sure.
But yeah, just that story just summed it up for me perfectly of Bruce and Grandpa sitting and talking and everything's going to be fine. That was really cool.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
How about for you?
Yeah, I think I hold on to a quote, ironically from Adam Hamilton. I'm sure he's not the person that came up with it, but he says a lot in sermons, especially when he's talking about chaos and peace and the differences between those things, is that the worst thing is never the last thing. Mm-hmm. I think that is a phrase that feels cliche, but also the worst thing is never the last thing. Like, we're going to go through some hard stuff, but because we believe in the resurrection of our bodies, that's not the last thing. And I just think that there are things that we go through, and there are definitely, like, I can get overwhelmed by the chaotic things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more of a person that's just going to put my head down and go forward and do my best not to look back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there have definitely been times where it's like, okay, I have in ministry, you know, there was a stretch when I was back in Burke, there was a week and a half period where I had 3 funerals in 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
Like, between the second and the third one, I was walking home from the funeral home. We lived on the same block as the funeral home. Went funeral home, church, our house. I was walking back from the funeral home, and Mike called me and said, hey, this is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, my natural inclination in that moment was just to tell him to, you know, find somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that. That's not how that works.
No.
You know, and so I was able to just, you know, put my head down and, you know, communicate to my wife that said, hey, this is where we are now. This is I have another funeral. I'm going to turn around and do this all over again in a couple more days. And just getting through that to the point where, like, after I'd gotten back to the church after that third funeral, and just the relief of knowing, like, I was going to have another funeral eventually, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how ministry works. But, like, getting through that stretch and then just knowing it was over, just the release of, you know, just giving thanks to God and saying, I did not get through this on my own power, and I know that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was truly a time where I felt like God was just giving me a peace to be, you know, to check my own emotions at the door and to really fully be present as much as possible for these families. And that's my job. That's my role in the funeral, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to do that to the point where you're just so taxed and just so done, and you just want to sleep and you can't, or just take a day off and you can't, and it's just, yeah, that's kind of my thing. Is I'm willing to just dig in and grit my teeth and do the things, and just kind of not even realize that we're through it until we're through it, and just look back and say, that's God.
Mm-hmm.
That's God's power in my life. That's the peace that passes understanding being made known to me.
Yeah. You know, and then sometimes in those situations where you've got a lot of, you know, different tasks ahead of you, and you don't know how you're going to get everything done and in a timely manner and be able to just be able to do all the things.
Yeah.
Praying for clarity and knowing what the right step is next and to not go down the wrong path.
Right.
I think is huge.
I agree.
Because sometimes, everyone's in those situations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know that my job is not unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are we doing next week?
Yeah. So next week is the continuation of the season of Advent, and we're going to be talking about joy. The first 2 weeks of Advent are embracing the bleak part of the story. You know, we are looking at a world that is hopeless. You know, when Jesus first was born, like, the world was hopeless. They had been waiting so long for this Messiah. Things were going out of control with their religiosity. They were ready.
Mm-hmm.
They had this hope. And we look at our world sometimes and feels like things are going out of control. Maybe not with religiosity, but things are going out of control. We are looking forward to the fulfillment of our hopes that are found in Jesus. And it can be pretty bleak when you're waiting and things aren't happening how they're supposed to happen. And then, you know, peace. We're looking at this world that's chaotic. Advent 3 is really where things shift in the season. I've always felt that way, that it's Joy Sunday. We're focusing on the fact that Jesus' birth into our world brings us so much joy, just unlimited joy. Mm-hmm. You know, what the scripture we'll be focusing on is the story of the shepherds. Like, shepherds are, by this point in time, like, shepherd is not a glamour job.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a pretty position to be in. It's not a job that everyone wants. It's what you have to do when you're at your wit's end. You become a shepherd. And the fact that angels appeared to shepherds and that their joy was so abundant that they quit everything and ran to Bethlehem to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they felt so much joy in just being included. And then not just being included in, like, a mundane thing, being included in the story of the birth of Jesus Christ, the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that they would have drawn joy from that for their entire rest of their lives. And the fact that God is a part of our lives and invites us to be a part of the story by us becoming the storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
We get to tell this story. How can we not find joy in proclaiming Jesus and all that Jesus means to us?
Right.
Finding that sense of joy in, the shepherds, the shepherds told Mary and Joseph about everything that happened, and then they go back to where they're from rejoicing. And we are in that same position. Yes, things are bleak. Yes, things are chaotic, but yet things are joyous because Jesus is born.
Yep.
So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this week's Cut for Time podcast. Join us again next week here in church, in person, online, or for the podcast next week.
Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.